Kevin, welcome to our video series of Stories of Resilience. It's good to see you. You have a very interesting story, which I would love you to share with the rest of the world. We'll talk about ACEs and we'll talk about the conference, but tell me a little bit about your background and your history.
Yeah, well, I was born into a large family, seventh member at that. There's nine, and being brought up at a young age, there was poverty. We were brought up around about poverty, unemployment. There wasn't a lot of pressure on my mum and dad through the years. There was, at 4 years old, I witnessed violence. It's one of the memories that I have as a 4-year-old. I always talk about how nobody ever came up and said, "How did that make you feel?" And I always felt I was left with that internal fear and anxiety. Being going to school, I would be at school. I felt that the teachers didn't have an interest in me, but at the same time, I couldn't take information in for the school teachers. And then going home at weekends and that, I'd go back and there could be domestic violence or domestic abuse going on, that lying in fear at night in my bed. And that went on for years, going to school, being bullied because I didn't have the best of clothes. And that's how my journey sort of started through not knowing. And while I sat in the class, I kind of seeked attention, just wanted to be part of something. And so I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but basically I was displaying a behaviour that basically I was just asking for help. But they saw it as a bad behaviour and not to sort of be put out of class and whatever, and then I saw the effects of what alcohol done to my parents, and I saw the effects of what alcohol done to other people when they drank it. But I always said that I would never do that. But, by the age of 13, I've been running away from school. I wasn't getting educated because I couldn't take any information, and I was that guy who sat at the back of the classroom with other guys who felt the teacher wasn't interested and I wasn't interested, and if I could get through my day, that was really it. And then at 13 I started drinking alcohol, and the best way I describe it, I always say that when even though I saw what alcohol done, I describe it as when I first drank alcohol, it was like being in a swimming pool and then you dive into the water and the sound goes boom. And that seemed to fixed me in the inside, and that was the start of a long journey. I was kicked out of school for my behaviour at the age of 14, so I ran on the streets, continuing drinking and starting to use drugs. I was in prison by the time I was 17. It was a horrible experience. I always said I'd never go back to prison, but I did. I became part of the revolving door, and then and through that I didn't know how to have a relationship with anybody. I build relationships, but I just break them down again.
I've got a couple of questions for you. In terms of you've been very honest about domestic violence, domestic abuse in the home. Was that something that you think your parents had seen with your grandparents? Was there a history of that?
No, I don't think so. When I look back on it now, because both my parents, I love them to bits. They've got, when I say that, my family have a very, very large family. We're very, very close. I felt there was pressure so much on both my parents to bring up nine children with no support and no effort. I never, ever saw my mum and dad raise their voice to each other sober, ever. So basically they two didn't know how to have and what I look back on now is they didn't really know how to communicate with each other, and everything they wanted to see each other through the week, they should have said they got a drink in them and it would come out. And that became a learned behaviour for me, because everything I didn't say to people or would like to say to people when I drank alcohol, I then done the same thing. So I don't think it fell through as I think it was just the pressure, just that environment, how we lived, what was happening then, was because my dad wasn't a violent man,
And your school experience, was that in the 80s?
80s, yep. I'd left school in 82, I think it was, 84, I'm trying to think, I can't remember the actual dates, but it was like 70s, 80s, because I'd left school and, my leaving date, I think I was kicked out of school in 82, but my leaving date was 84, and I was in prison by 86. So it was like that.
And you've obviously recognised that that your time at school was very stressful for you, but
Yeah.
something that wasn't recognised by your teachers. We did an interview recently with Ruth Mackay from Portobello High School, and she talked about this, and she talked about the change in approach to teaching. It's not just about reading, writing, arithmetic now. It's about understanding young people and understanding why young men, for instance, might want to sit at the back of a classroom as opposed to being told to sit at the front, where a teacher can keep an eye on them and get them to behave, as it were. So I think there seems to be a real understanding now in schools of the sort of toxic stress that young people are under. But you and I were probably at school at the same time. It was a case of grin and bear it, wasn't it? Just get on with it.
Yeah. Do you know, I was at that period where they used the belt at school, and then the belt was removed by government and all that stuff. And teachers, I was singled out, and so was my brothers and other guys from my area were singled out because of the way we dressed. My parents couldn't afford a school uniform, so I was made to stand outside the rector's office every playtime and every lunchtime, every day, because I never had a school uniform. And then the other kids' perceptions of me was I was a bad guy, and I'd have to stand there while they all went for their lunch, and I just had this, everybody thinks I'm bad, and I wasn't really being that bad at school, but I thought, well, you know what, I'm getting treated like this, so it became this rebellious in me because of the way I was being treated, all because I didn't wear a school tie, or or my family couldn't afford it. So the teachers didn't know at the time, but I felt that they singled out and they focused on the kids it was easy to learn, and I was basically classed as a difficult child, or a difficult kid. So I remember in one class in particular where they says, as long as I don't interrupt the rest of the class, I could just sit there. And that was a way of dealing with me, and I quite liked that, because I didn't feel under stress that I had to write or I had to try and read, or do you know what I mean? So they took the pressure away from me by not giving me any education, and I quite liked that.
You mentioned that that actually your time in prison was not necessarily relaxing, but you were less stressed in prison than you were when you were out.
Absolutely. I think that when you go into any environment, any unknown environment, there's a sense of anxiety and fear, no matter where you go in life, even if it's to go for a job interview, to a new place. Coming here today is a sense of anxiety because it's a different sounding. But what happens is when you go into prison, it's like anywhere, you settle in. And when you settle in, the stress leaves you because you've not got the same pressures. I don't need to worry about when I'm getting breakfast, lunch and dinner. I don't need to worry about my clothes being washed. I know I've got a bed. So all these pressures are taken off me. And I can actually relax. I found myself always relaxed in prison. It was always the first, I always said a jail sentence was 7 days. Regardless of what happened after that, it was just the 7 days into the routine of what happened between Sunday to Sunday. And once you knew that system, that was you settled in. So there was a lot of stress took away. Prison's meant to punish you. And it's quite interesting because my last prison sentence, when I went into prison, previous to that I was going into like Victorian settings where you didn't have much in a prison cell. And then a few years later I went back again and they opened the door and there was a kettle and there was a quilt cover and there was a television and there was a toilet and I immediately asked to phone my lawyer because I wanted to cancel the appeal because I was staying. And that's because that was the reality, how between outside in society and in a prison,
Kim McGuigan tells a similar story in her story of resilience, how she was quite annoyed that the judge didn't send her to jail.
Yeah,
and it's an amazing when you're not in that environment or you've not been privy to that environment. These are amazing stories that you don't consider. As a layman, as somebody who works in this wonderful media world, you don't think about life on the other side of those prison walls.
Yeah.
It's really, really interesting, and I think people who are listening to this will find it interesting too. When you came out of prison, within 72 hours, you'd relapsed, you were telling me?
Yep. So I was in prison serving a long-term prison sentence. I was on a high dose of methadone. I was a heroin addict, crack cocaine addict, alcoholic, all that. I'd smashed every relationship in my life and I had to rebuild that. I knew in my conscience I'd done wrong. I knew I was making all the wrong choices and I'd made all the bad mistakes and I just wanted to stop using drugs and I wanted to stop committing crime and I just wanted to be normal. Of what that is, but I'm not a levelly sane. And so in prison, I used prison to my advantage, and I got off methadone. I was absolutely clean for substances, and And then I was released back into society, and I'd relapsed within 72 hours. And in that period of time, of over 2 years, I had 2 near-death experiences through overdose, and then going to rehab. The thing for me is the fact that over the years, I've watched prisons evolve for the 80s into the 2000s. And I've watched them evolve and bringing in education, healthcare, and so in there, it's changed. And what hasn't changed is this side of the wall. That's what's not changed. It's actually got worse. You know, so.
And when did the realization of ACEs come into your life? Because everything seemed to make sense to you at that point when you saw the film Resilience, I believe.
Yeah. Do you know, I was talking, and people have heard a talk that I've done previous before I even saw any film of Resilience, and everybody can identify that I'm talking about ACEs, and I've never even mentioned the word ACE because I don't even know about it myself. And I always found it hard to find ways to describe. And there's a beautiful part in the Resilience movie where, and I use it today because it's no, and I use it with guys that I work with as well today, but it was not what was wrong with me, it was what happened to me. And I loved that phrase because I thought, you know, I know what's happened to me, and it wasn't my parents' fault. You know, there was many, many different factors that happened in my life. You know, when I seen the science and the brain science, and then once I saw Resilience, I started going reading more and investigating and finding out more information about attachment, and I absolutely get it. And so that gave me, so I would say, ammunition, you know, evidence. So when I'm talking about me, I've got this, you know, I'm not making this up. Because I've sometimes felt when I was telling people my story, they were like, all right. But then New Resilience, the study, what went behind it, is just absolutely phenomenal for me to not just for me to help recover me and to look at me and to take away the blame and the shame and the guilt. That's what Resilience done. But it's also gave me tools to actually fit into the job I do today, helping others.
And you are now giving something back. You've got a charity, Aid Abet,
Yeah.
Which is the aim of?
The aim of it is supporting guys coming out of prison and giving them that initial 72-hour support.
It's a critical window, is it?
Absolutely. We're a charity. We don't close because normally crises can happen after 5 at night. So we're a charity. We don't close, especially at the weekend when somebody's released from prison on a Friday. There's no services there for them. So we do our utmost to get them shelter, accommodation, benefits of some form of money, either food bank, food parcels, food, or and a GP. And that's the first 3 things we'll do. And then we ask the individual, what's going on in your life and where do you want to go? And when they're saying, like, for instance, if or what it may be, you know, as I say, if a guy says to me, Kev, you know what, I've been going to prison because I keep robbing bakers' hopes for cakes, then he needs a dietitian. Do you know? So if a guy comes and he's wanting a problem, a guy or a girl, whatever the root to the problem is, it's about getting them to a proper professional. So this is why I'm always passionate about you know, the relationships and partnerships and connections and collaboration, you know, because it's very vital that we've all got a part to play. You know, Aid Abet just plays a small part, really.
Relationships are central to everything.
Yeah. I mean, you know, when you've not got relationships, first thing that happens is you've got isolation. Isolation leads to addiction and leads to soothing, and you'll use anything if you don't want to be yourself. And so relationships is vital, but not just on a personal level, on a one-to-one personal level, but relationships and like working relationships, business working relationships. It's right across the board. I feel that in the field that I work in, there's a lot of us and them attitudes. There's a lot of barriers. We, as the guys at Aid Abet, we talk about bending boundaries. You know, there's boundaries, but we've got to bend them. We've got to get there. We do things that other organisations would say that's an absolute no-no. You know, but as long as we're not breaking the law in any shape, size or form, we can bend that boundary. And that boundary is self-disclosure. You know, where I was at an event where I was speaking to school teachers, and if a kid is using a substance at school, rather than punishing the kid for using the substance at school, they can go and find out why he's using it or she's using that substance. You know, but the teacher will say, no, expelled for the school. And what I ask these teachers is, how many of you smoked a joint at university? And they all laughed, but they never raised their hands. But the laugh told me enough. And this is what I'm saying is, so if you get a connection and there's a kid who's smoking dope at school and doing whatever, and a teacher can say, do you know what, I smoked dope as well, but I don't need to, and I'm a school teacher. Mm-hmm. The kid can go and get a relationship, get a connection. Did you? You know, but there's this sort of, we have never done, and it's the same in all fields, in all lines of work. I'm just using school teachers as an example. It can be an employer. It can be, rather than punish, find out why. you know.
And what about your relationships now?
Do you know what? I was a guy, you said it there, you know, we need relationships. I was in a circle, me, in that circle. And what I realised and what I had to do, when I look back on it, I'm obviously done unconsciously, I didn't go, this is my plan. But what I've realised is the more people that I've got in my circle is, I would say, packing with so many individuals that I can use. And I say that in a caring way, because when I say use, I mean be approaching people that I can go and say, I've got an issue, I've got a problem, or can I help? Can you help me with this or that? You know what I mean? So relationships has been vital to me. I've outstanding, wonderful relationships today. I never thought would ever happen. You know, so that's why it's key that the whole point to recovery, the whole point to dealing with stress, dealing with trauma, is having that relationship, whether it be with a professional, a parent, family member.
And my final question for you, Kevin, is and we've asked every guest this, but what does an ideal ACE Aware nation look like for you?
And well, do you know what? It's for me, it's about harm reduction, and I use that. And my line of work is to reducing the harm. So if we're reducing the stress in our communities in Scotland, and we're going to the hardest hit areas, but the studies state that it's some of the highest ACEs is for the poverty, most impoverished areas. And what I would like to see, how I see an ACE Aware nation, is that everybody knows. The thing is where we need to take the information that I feel, and it's a personal thing to me, is we need to get it. I know I need to get it to parents. You know, they say the most vital time for a kid's life is the first 1,000 days or something, the first 3 years. That first 3 years is happening in the house before they get to nursery. You know, there's so many single parents out there, male and female, single parents who are pressured and stressed to provide for their kids, to provide for them. And the thing that lacks is love, providing that love for their kid, because they've been forced into employment or forced in. And they wonder why some of the guys that I work with today, you wonder why they're where they're at when they tell you their story.
I lied to you there. I've got one more question. You talk to decision makers, you talk to government, and you can be quite critical of them and their approach and their partners. How do they take that criticism? Do they listen? Are they listening?
I actually feel they do listen. However, I feel they listen on a personal level. And also, I wouldn't like to say that the government has been, they definitely have been doing stuff. I mean, I've saw school teachers are changing. Police officers in the field that I've been in, working alongside police officers, I've seen police officers changing attitudes as well, and how they proceed with stuff. And I've also seen government changing, just in small parts. So, you know, but we talk about an ACE Aware nation. It has to happen all over. I'm only talking about where I am. And no, where I'm in the capital of Scotland. I'm in a city. And usually you get Glasgow, Edinburgh, Aberdeen, and they start to get, this support and help, but what about the rest of Scotland? And that's where, is the change happening there? Is the information getting there? You know, we can bring the information to the big cities, the big hitters, but as we're getting this information to the people who really need to hear it.
Kevin, I could talk to you all day. It's been a fascinating journey. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.